Hello and happy Sunday. I hope that this day finds you well. I hope your family are well, and I hope that you're having a good week. We are here in Rebecca. Rebecca is my 1969 Morris Minor, and I've seen quite a few comments going past. We've noticed, in fact, Nikki actually specifically said to me, "Hey Kate, could you do a quick Sunday musing on Rebecca? Because we're getting a lot of questions about her." So, you've seen her in the background in a couple of videos. This is my car. I've had her for a very long time, roughly since I was 13 years old. Early 90s, I was found lying under the car by the owner because they had more or less abandoned her in a council lockup area. Like in Britain, there are council garages that you can rent to put your car in. It's kind of like the storage places you can rent to put your RVs and things in here. And I'd seen this car parked up on my walk home, just on the side of the street, and then it got a your car is untaxed, you need to move it notice, and so it then moved to this patch of council garages, and I was just looking at it to see whether I thought it was restorable, which, I had zero knowledge about. I knew about engines and mechanics because that's what my parents had taught me about, but I didn't know about metalwork, and that was kind of an important hole in my knowledge. But £20 later, after some long discussions with my parents, I was the owner of this fine automobile, which I love dearly. She has a long and storied history. She was owned by what was termed a maiden aunt, so it's very possible that she was owned by a lesbian for much of her life. And then she was restored when my dad got sick. He paid for her to be restored. Unfortunately, the company that did it did an appalling job. I actually ended up in a prolonged court case because they'd glued parts of the car together. And not like unimportant parts, like the chassis legs glued on. Not a good idea. So, she's been around, and she's actually been restored a couple of times because that's how I found out that she was glued together, was that there were some engine problems, and I said, "Oh, can you freshen up the engine bay?" And in the process, the company that was, it's a race company in England, they said, "We can't freshen up the engine bay. You need to see these pictures." Sent me some pictures, and I went, "Oh dear God." So she was then restored a second time, kind of a long story. And at that time, I knew that I wanted to do an electric conversion in the long term, but I knew I didn't have the money. So I kind of sketched out what I thought would be useful. So we have a 5-speed gearbox, which was for fun. It's a Ford Type 9 box. And then at the back, we have an English diff with a 3.91 ratio, I think, which doesn't give great off-the-line performance, but does give me a good top speed. And up front, we have my kind of last hurrah, shall we say, with petrol, which I kind of decided it would be my last hurrah. So I had a 1300 engine that needed rebuilding. Went up there, turned out it wasn't rebuildable, so they replaced it with a new 1300 engine, which I had a fast road cam and high flow air filter and a bigger carburetor installed. And yeah, so, I was enjoying the car very briefly because I got the car back about a week or so before moving to the US. And yeah, so I got the car back, drove it down from where it was restored to Bristol, had it steam cleaned, put it in a container, shipped it to America, drove it from Tacoma to Olympia, where I live, and then drove it for a few weeks. And in that time I went, doesn't sound quite right. Something sounds wrong. Eventually took her to a Jiffy Lube I think it was a Jiffy Lube, some kind of lubrication place, where they drained the oil and revealed that the differential oil was basically metal. So the differential had failed probably about 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles after it was rebuilt. Contacted the company that restored her. They said, we'll talk to the differential company. Long story short, I have ended up with a car with no diff. So I have a diff. It was like the diff was replaced at my own expense. However, unfortunately, they sent the wrong one. So it has the right diff, but it has the wrong flange on it. So the flange doesn't mate with the prop shaft. That unfortunately wasn't realised by the garage that was installing it for me because I was living somewhere where I couldn't work on the car. And then there was about a 2-year period of back and forth between me, them, and the company that restored her back in England, which ended up with the car being somewhat unceremoniously extracted from the garage and dumped in this garage, which was built pretty much exclusively to store tools and Rebecca. So she's kind of been sat here making me sad, getting dustier and dirtier and sadder. And it's kind of reached the point where what I want to do, I'm like, well, I can fix her, but I'm not going to drive her if I do, because I don't like buying petrol. I don't like buying gasoline. It just is a miserable experience and it makes me feel bad. So we need to convert her to electric. How are we going to do that? Well, I could use the stuff that I bought. So this, you'll see, is a J1772 outlet. Well, input. It's input socket. I have one of these. I have a DC-DC converter. I have a net gain 8-inch motor, which does exist, don't tell me it doesn't. And it's a Warp 8, which was made for a very short period of time. And I have, I think it's a Curtis controller to go with it. But I don't want to do that, because that is tech that is hideously out of date, won't give me regen, and is all closed source. So I could control the net gain motor using an open source controller, which is a possibility. And I should think about that more and less about what I want to do. So what I'd like to do is convert her using all, as far as possible, all open source and recycled components. So I've been looking at Damien Maguire's Lexus GS450H drivetrain conversion. So that takes the gearbox notional out of a Lexus GS450, and you lock off the input shaft, and then you can use the motor generators in there to power your electric vehicle, and that is more than adequate for a car this size. Now, the challenge with that is that the Lexus gearbox weighs, I believe, about 120 kilos, and the Ford Type 9 gearbox in the car weighs about 30 kilos, I believe. Probably more with the bell housing, probably around 40. So that is a fairly big difference. I'm not sure about how the structure of the car will deal with that kind of change and what I would need to do that. But with that, I could then go down the open inverter route or repurpose a Lexus inverter. I could use open source charging components. One thing I'm really looking for, so this is part of the purpose of this, is not just to just ramble at you about the car, but if any of you have great links or good links for open source CCS rapid charging, I know that there are people looking at repurposing the European Tesla charger with some open source components to make a CCS rapid charger that you can just get kind of semi off the shelf, because I know the CCS protocol is a nightmare. I've seen one project that looks like it's working towards a CCS rapid charger that's completely open source, and that would be cool. I'm very happy with a soldering iron. I'm quite happy to put something together. In fact, I like putting things together. So So if anyone has links to those, please drop them in the comments below. If you have suggestions for how to convert the car, so I am very much on a budget. This is a project that is a back burner project because I'm still working on the house. But I really want to get this car going again. It makes me so sad every time I come in the garage. I love, I have driven this car a very long time. It was my main car for a long time. And obviously, because of my dad's illness, I have some real connections to this vehicle that are weird and difficult to kind of work out. But she's never been amazingly reliable. She's always been hard work to keep on the road. Which is standard, actually. That's a standard feature of British cars. You need to give them a couple of hours a week of fettling, otherwise it all mounts up and then it comes back and bites you. And when I was working near London, and I didn't have time to look after her, and she was ferrying me to and from work, yeah, all of that time's come back and bitten me. So thoughts about that. Thoughts about good places to get salvage batteries. It might be that I need to buy an entire car and strip it down. Might be that I can find a good source for batteries. There's a really interesting project that looks at using 18650 cells in a kind of container to build an open source pack, and it has a BMS. It's based up in Canada. And I've emailed the folks behind that to just kind of get a feel for how terrifyingly expensive that is. And I do wonder, if you do that, whether you could use recycled 18650 cells, which would be really nice to continue using all recycled components. So yeah, links to anything about that would be great. Links to ideas about how to achieve a really good conversion, resources for that, anything like that. Throw them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you about how you think this should be done. Obviously, this is not something we'll be doing loads of videos on, because, unless you want them. But for the most part, we like to cover newer, cleaner, greener, safer, smarter technology. There is definitely some interest in conversions, but it's never going to be the main focus of our channel. So this is not going to be something that, at least on the main channel, we'll be doing loads of videos on. But I'm happy to keep you updated, so let us know if that's something you'd like. So that's it. That's my little Sunday musing. It's more of a Sunday rambling this week, but you let me know what resources you have, and then it's amusing. Before I go, just I hope that you are well. I love you all. You're wonderful people who support us. It's great. We couldn't do what we do without you. So I hope that you and your families are all well. Remember to wear a mask, wash your hands, wash your mask. Actually, that's another important one. Maintain your social distancing, or at least physical distancing. You don't have to be socially distant, just physically distant. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do what we do without your support, so thank you. On the right, scrolling by, are $15 to $49 a month Patreons. And special thank you to our $50 a month Patreon supporters. That is John Lyons, Regine Fellows, and Jeffrey Songster. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. That's Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, and Sean Udea. And you can also support us using Ko-fi and Bitcoin. There are links down below. And if you want to chat with the team, you can join us on our Discord server. There is a link hidden. It's down below. And you can come chat with the team and other supporters of Transport Evolved. So, till next time, keep evolving.